This is a conversation I'm having with a lot of people at the moment. If I've got a 20% weighting in the United States, a big chunk of that's likely to be in the S&P, and if I'm a euro investor, that's really hurt this year. Can you see anything changing that going into year end? The dollar's been on a little bit of a tear.
So we do think that the dollar will, especially against the euro, will moderate. I actually do think the path of the euro between now and year end is higher. We think that's partly because you now have, I think, a lot more optimism around tax in the U.S. that's in the price. The market's now close to fully pricing in a December rate hike, and the euro remains a very cheap currency that where we think economic momentum is still supportive. So, I do think that the path probably for the euro is a little bit higher into the end of the year, despite it pulling back last week.
We've seen huge amounts of money pouring into the Japanese market of late. This is a long-term flow chart, and you can just see of late money's just completely flipped around and gone back into Japan. Is that the right trade?
I think it is, actually. So I think Japan's a very interesting story this year. It's been a little bit overlooked because there have been more exciting stories in EM, in Europe. The U.S. market's been quite strong. But here's a market where earnings are growing over 20%, where the multiple is still low, where policy is still incredibly accommodative. And we actually think that broad-based measures of deflation in Japan will, in the next 2 quarters, end for the first time in maybe 20 years. So there is some big macroeconomic change that's going on. It's not just short-term noise around the election. And I think that still makes Japan a pretty attractive market to be in relative to other global
It's a long-term story because people have had their fingers burnt in Japan. We've seen some big rallies.
Yeah. They have, and again, look, this is a case where the government, for that long-term case to work, is going to need to deliver on reform. But I think, between now and year end, or even over the next 6 months, I think that combination of compelling valuations, good earnings growth, and I think even despite the recent inflows, pretty light overall positioning.
Yeah, I was about to say, how are people set up in terms of their portfolios?
I still think exposure to Japan is relatively low versus other regions, and yes, you've had some flows in over the last couple of weeks, but until then, flows had been very, very small.